Investigate before you invest. Call your Better Business Bureau for information.
Just ahead, fire races through the upper floors of the National City Bank building in Cleveland, causing millions in damage. We'll have a series of reports.
And Honduras, demonstrators in Cleveland and in many cities across the country speak out against sending the troops to Central America, and Honduras prepares to counterattack. A little bit of winter and a little bit of spring.
Cleveland State won its NIT game. Will meet Ohio State next. We'll have the pictures of all the top high school and college tournaments.
10 o'clock news is coming up next.
The 10 o'clock news is brought to you tonight by Finest, where you get first-class shopping at a total lower cost.
This is WUAB, Channel 43, Lorraine, Cleveland. Now, the first look at tonight's news with Bob Hetherington, Ramona Robinson, meteorologist Frank Cariello, and sports director Gib Shandley. This is the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening. A fire that broke out late this morning in a downtown building forced nearly 200 people inside to escape down a stairwell.
Flames started on the 8th floor of the 10th-story National City Bank East 6th Street building, gutting that floor and damaging 3 other. Fire officials and those who work there say the evacuation went smoothly and that it was already underway by the time fire rescue teams arrived. Police closed 2 blocks of Euclid Avenue. Authorities now estimate the damage at more than $3 million. Reporter Barbara Serrano was at the scene.
Well, walk behind the truck, please. They're knocking out windows.
Firefighters broke windows and pumped water into offices as the downtown lunch crowd looked on. The building's manager and a construction supervisor say the fire was apparently caused by a welding torch used during office renovations, though investigators have not yet confirmed that. The workday was in full swing when the blaze and word of it spread.
I was with a client at the time and heard the commotion and didn't know anything about the fire, but then they made an announcement to evacuate, so I had to get this client, was an elderly woman, get her out.
Most people inside were not aware of the fire until word came over the paging system to evacuate. But those on the 10th floor where construction is underway could not hear the warning.
Opened the door to give my secretary a letter and was met with total black and smoke and thought I better get out of here. And as I was trying to make my way to where I knew the exit was, I heard a girl saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. It was one of the secretaries.
Hastings helped the woman, who has asthma, down 2 floors. She was the only person hospitalized. Others returned to work in the afternoon. However, smoke and water damage on the upper floors will keep many employees away.
It's going to be major damage. We don't have a dollar figure. We probably won't because a lot of intangibles there, records, computers, and so on.
An insurance investigator told me that the heat has turned papers in the file cabinets to dust. The next step for the firms is to try to sort out records and salvage whatever they can. Like any fire, those who fight them face many dangers and risks. Monica Banks has more on this.
Every time the fire department responds to a fire, the men are risking their lives. John Lash was one of the first firemen to reach the scene today. They saw the need for additional personnel right away, so the assistant chief called for more backup.
He did that right from the car as we pulled up. And then I went inside to find out where it was located and relay that information back to him. Then he sends the manpower into me, and we get adjusted on the floors we need and get in and put the fire out.
They took a tremendous beating from the heat up there. As in any high-rise fire, you've got a lot of heat, and you can't get the windows out to vent the heat. And every time they put water on the fire, it turns to steam, and it literally cooks them right up there. So we're going to let them take a break for a little bit here and try and regain their strength before we send them back to another fire.
Many times in cases like this, you'll see the American Red Cross Disaster Unit on hand. Today, they were there to provide some of the relief the assistant chief talked about.
Right now, we are just providing them with coffee and cookies and cold water, which is really necessary to cut the smoke out of their throats. So this is about the size of it. If they were going to be here longer, we would order them a lunch and bring it out to them.
This just happens to be American Red Cross Month. And the fire today is one example of how the American Red Cross works all year long to help when disaster strikes. Monica Banks reporting for the 10 o'clock news.
The last of more than 3,000 American troops arrived in Honduras today in a dramatic display of American military strength. 800 soldiers dropped into the jungle before dawn at a site 5 miles from the Palmarola Air Base. Late today, Honduras asked for U.S. help in ferrying Honduran troops to the scene of their battle with Nicaraguan forces, and Pentagon officials say the request is likely to be approved. Reaction to the troop deployment is bitterly mixed on Capitol Hill. Some members of Congress are calling for an immediate Contra aid package, while one senator said President Reagan's action matched stupidity with stupidity.
The Central American operation known as Golden Pheasant is now in full swing in Honduras, and Honduran officials say they'll attack Sandinista forces within Honduras tomorrow. Reagan administration officials continue to insist that the U.S. forces will see no combat, but Defense Secretary Carlucci pointed out that the Pentagon never comments on contingency possibilities. Lucia Newman has this story from Managua.
It looked more like an American invasion of Honduras, as the last contingent of 3,200 U.S. troops parachuted in an impressive display of military might. They're being deployed throughout the country for joint military maneuvers in response to what Washington calls an invasion of Honduras by Nicaraguan soldiers, amid a major Sandinista border offensive to wipe out the Contras. For the first time since the crisis broke, President Jose Ascona addressed the nation to confirm he had asked for Washington's help. He said Honduran fighter planes would again bombard the Honduran-Nicaraguan border to flush out what he called the invading Sandinista forces if they did not leave at once. The Sandinistas deny they've made any incursions. The Americans, though, are not to take part in combat or come any closer than 70 miles to the fighting area. U.S. Embassy officials deny that Washington twisted Honduras' arm to bring in the troops.
Is a fine demonstration of our ability to respond very quickly when asked, to show support, and here we are.
But Honduran opposition leader Jorge Arturo Reina says the Americans are here to defend the Contras, not Honduras, and that is humiliating. Although thousands of Honduran troops have been sent to the border to confront the Sandinistas, the main attention is still focused on the Americans. How long will they stay?
We don't set a timeline on when the troops practice these deployments. But if one would survey the recent deployments, it'd be anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks.
The government here continues to respond, mainly to allegations originating out of Washington. One local newspaper asked angrily, why do we have to wait to hear from the United States before we know what's happening in Honduras? Lucia Newman, CNN, Tegucigalpa.
The situation in Honduras prompted demonstrators all across the country to take to the streets. From the nation's capital to San Francisco, protesters called on the White House to bring the troops home. Hundreds lined the streets outside the White House today, chanting, "Bring our troops back." And in Chicago, several arrests were made, and traffic was slowed by demonstrators blocking cars in the loop. Nationwide, nearly 300 arrests have been reported. And as David Lane reports, similar emotions are sweeping through Cleveland as well.
Armed with chants and signs of protest, over 100 demonstrators paraded in front of the federal building.
We hope to send a loud message to members of Congress and the Reagan administration that further intervention in Central America is not acceptable.
The demonstration received maximum exposure as downtown rush hour commuters snarled in traffic became a captive audience. Organized by the Central American Coalition of Northeast Ohio, the protest focused on the recent airlift of U.S. troops to Honduras and against any further funding of Contra aid from Congress. The group feels the United States is moving ever closer to a Vietnam-type involvement.
It seems that the first step would be to send troops to Honduras and just sit there. If there's no American reaction, then the second step might be to actually take those troops and send them into Nicaragua. And thus, we're saying that the first step is unacceptable before we get to that Vietnam and Central America.
Organizers say today's protest was not purely coincidental and that it was timed to coincide with a number of other demonstrations across the country protesting the shipping of U.S. troops to Honduras. In downtown Cleveland, David Lane reporting for the 10 o'clock news.